Well, good morning, good afternoon, folks. Thank you for joining us. I am BK, Director of the Park Maintenance Institute, and we're welcoming you all today for an important focus on Shop Talk as we think about amenities for next year, possibly projects and important considerations to think about for splash pads. So over the last decade, there's been an addition of aquatic solutions in municipal parks. Water attractions are highly beneficial for early childhood development, encouraging movement and socialization within communities, and increasingly sedentary lifestyles. So we want to get the kids out to play and give them something fun to do. Water management systems are a crucial component for every aquatic solution, as it ensures water quality, community health, safety, and sustainability. We have invited Mike McGilbra, sales executive at Vortex Aquatic Structures International, to share his industry knowledge and expertise in aquatic systems through a series of discussions. We had Mike with us, I want to say 2 months ago, and now we've invited him back. In today's presentation, we're going to explore the different types of water management systems and the important role they play within the health, safety, and welfare of families and communities. We discuss the technical specifications and venue requirements for each system to enable you carefully choose the most adequate system for your community. Our learning objectives for today are to determine whether a splash pad needs a filtration system or a flow-through system. We're going to think about choosing the right type of housing for specific projects. We're going to hopefully gain a better understanding of requirements for installation of the various systems. And we're going to have you walk away with an understanding and the ability to communicate pros and cons for each system so that you can advise your communities and the folks that are paying for the system at the end, what are the optimal choices for the sites. Now, before we kick off today, I would like to start with the video from our sponsor. I tell you, Mike, I bet you that big bucket's probably a popular one.
No, BK, it's actually the kids stay away from it. The family tends to, totally run the other way, Yeah, it's a crowd gathering place for sure. Anytime that it's involved in a project, I make sure that I'm there for opening day because it's always such a hit, and when kids see it for the first time, that just never gets old.
Oh yeah, it's almost like the dunking booth and your principal's sitting up there, right?
Oh yeah, boy, that brings back some memories.
Well, I'm going to hand it off to you, so it's your show now, Mike.
All right, thanks, BK. Let me share my screen here. BK, make sure that when I go to share my screen, I am sharing the correct screen here. So let's. All good?
You're good.
Still good? Okay. Cool. Well, hey, thanks again, BK. I really appreciate you guys having me back. I'm depending on the party, I'm not always welcome back. So, so today we're here to discuss water management. We're going to touch on the 3 different types of water management solutions, what's all involved, the different components for those different water management solutions, making sure that you're making the right choice. At the end of the day, this is going to be one of the more critical decisions you make when you're starting a Splashpad project. So without further ado, so again, today we're going to cover the importance of a WQMS or a WMS for health and safety affairs, different types of systems, the advantages and considerations, such as cost, upfront cost, installation cost. We'll touch on intelligent water control to minimize water consumption. And we'll also get into some future trends that are and innovations that are coming up that are super exciting in today's Splashpad market. So let's get started. Why are water management systems so important? Yeah, kind of an obvious answer here, but beneath all the eye-catching features of the Splashpad is an intricate system that controls water usage, quality, and ensures that your Splashpad will be safe, efficient, and sustainable over time. Oftentimes, safety and health get thrown in the same category, but they're actually, 2 different things. Safety is more making sure there's no finger entrapments, that the kids, when they're playing on the Splashpad, aren't going to get hurt. And when we think about healthy, we want to make sure that that the water quality that kids are bathing in, whether it be a pool or a Splashpad, is suitable and safe to be playing in. So different distinctions there. So yeah, I would argue that this is the most important part of the Splashpad. It's the heart of the Splashpad. I always like to make the car analogy that you can't drive the car off the lot without an engine. You can't run a Splashpad without a water management system. They're specifically engineered based on your project's requirements, your needs, and what you're trying to accomplish. Our water management systems also comply with the highest standards of water quality and have built-in safeguards to not only, again, protect users, keep them healthy, but also impact your installation's maintenance, sustainability, and provide you with a competitive advantage when it comes to pricing. So not just Vortex, but in the Splashpad world in general, there are 3 typical types of water management solution options. We have recirculation system, or sometimes referred to as a water quality management system. I will just use the acronym WQMS. So in this presentation, if you hear me say WQMS, I'm referring to a recirculation system. There's flow-through system, which is we're just using a potable water source, hooking it up to your manifold that's going to flow to typically your sanitary sewer, and our repurposing solutions. There's 3 different types of repurposing solutions that I'll dive into later on in the presentation. But the surface idea here is that we're taking the water that's used in the Splashpad and, just like the title says, repurposing that to an irrigation system or a ball field or what have you. It's a very go green option as far as water management is concerned. All right, so first things first, recirculation systems. A recirculation system is a closed circuit system that manages the quality of water. It recycles, filters, and disinfects the water to and from the play area. It's the ideal solution for medium high capacity Splashpads where water consumption needs to be reduced or optimized. It's also very ideal for areas where water is at a premium, it's not of abundance. Places in states like California, where circulation systems are required. There is no option for a flow-through system. You're either recirculating or you're repurposing the water to nourish a nearby landscaping field. So what are some ideal venues for recirculation systems? Typically in our neck of the woods, I see recirculation systems involved in Splashpads that are over 3,000 square feet. Usually Splashpads that are over 3,000 square feet also exceed the threshold capacity of 150 gallons per minute. Now, that's not a law or a requirement or a code. It's just where we start to, folks like myself, start to advise customers that, hey, you're going to be dumping 150 gallons per minute of water down the drain. Again, this is a decision that's totally up to you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. But, let's think about over the course of a 100-day season, how much water that's actually going to be. Whether you have your own water supply or not, that's a ton of water that we're dumping down the drain. If you're looking for everything in the catalog to be available to you, a WQMS is probably going to be a more suitable option, because there are low flow features and then there are high flow features. So BK, you happen to bring up the big dumping bucket. As you can imagine, or anybody else imagine on this call, that big dumping bucket uses quite a bit of water just by itself. We're looking at about, every time it dumps about 30 gallons. It's 30 gallons of water that's going to dump. That's dumping just about every minute. So as soon as we start to involve those types of features, we're looking at more the recirculation system. It also, it does, not by a lot, but it does, due to the friction of running through pumps and running through pipes, it does increase the temperature of the water. So I was actually just meeting with Cranberry Township not too long ago, and they said that in the past they had gotten complaints that their Splashpad water was too cold. So if that is a concern in your area as well, a recirculation system, although it doesn't have a water heater involved in the overall solution, it is a little bit higher of a temperature than that of a flow-through system. So for a WQMS, it's important to find the right housing that meets the requirements of the site. Every site is different, and it's important to understand the options that you have that fit your site exactly the way it should. So we have a module, and I'm going to go over each system or each option here in a little bit of detail in these upcoming slides. But we have a modular system, we have a dome pack system, and we have a skid pack system. So again, a three-tiered option here as far as how are we going to house our water quality management system components. So our modular system, obviously we're looking at a real life photo here. I wish this picture was a little bit more expanded out so we can see the entire room. Although I do have a nice 3D top view image here that I'm about to show you. But this is typically 25% less expensive than the other two options, but it requires more work on site to connect and secure all of the different connections because it's not pre-assembled. It's more flexible. So usually we're seeing these on existing buildings. So if you have an existing 12 by 16 building, which is a pretty tight space, given that if we're looking at a splash pad that's using quite a bit of water, that's a pretty tight space. You're probably not going to be able to fit or use anything but a modular type of solution where we can fit 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag.
Just to jump in quick, Mike. Now,
yeah,
this looks very similar to like a pool house, like if you're working at a small municipal pool or something. Now, would this, if you have a splash pad and a pool, would you need to have two separate housing, or would you be able to fit it all in the same area?
You could have it all in the same area. However, just to keep things like separated to keep it simple and knowing, especially when you think about turnover within a community. Okay, well, what's controlling the pool? What's actually controlling the splash pad? So at least having some type of partition between the pool equipment and the splash pad equipment, just it can be helpful. I actually have that exact situation going on just outside of Columbus, Ohio, and they did exactly what I'm explaining, where they, they're actually using their existing chemical feeders, their chemical tanks, to feed the splash pad as well. But they have their own tank for the splash pad. They have their own debris trap. They have their own, everything else it has a dedicated component to the splash pad. Those chemical tanks that they are utilizing to that are for the pool and the splash pad, those are partitioned off from the rest of the splash pad equipment. So does that
Yeah, it does. It's just, so there's, looking at your diagram here, that point 11, that's your chemical area. So that essentially could be feeding another pump area. And so you're dual purposing one chemical area in design, essentially.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
So just thinking about that. So it can be an expansion of your existing system, but it still is something to take into account, that it does need a separate, you can't tie them both together.
That's right. So, and we're starting to see that as far as state codes are concerned, to be more, to be becoming an actual code where the splash pad will need everything to be its own respective system. That it's no longer going to be able to be allowed to be tied into the pool system. And that's due to a myriad of reasons, but just top of my head, your splash pad tank is typically turned over, and I'm stealing my own thunder here a little bit, but that tank is turned over at least 30 minutes, where a pool needs to turn over about every 6 to 8 hours. So that turnover rate is such a huge difference. And not to go off on a crazy tangent here, but if you do have a pool and a splash pad, and let's say there's a fecal accident in the pool, well, now it doesn't also shut down your splash pad. You still have something open for, in the meantime, until the pool is able to get back up and running.
Excellent point. Excellent point.
All right. So we're looking at a top view of a modular system option here. I'm not going to dive into all the 12 components, but this just gives you a really good idea of a typical design for a room. I do want to point out the window that's above the distribution manifold here, and that's just to it makes whoever's taking care of the splash pad makes their life a whole heck of a lot easier. That way, any flow adjustments, they can see those in real time, rather than having to get out of the room, check it, go back into the room, make another correction, so on and so forth. But we can see your eye wash stations, your drains. So beneath this this pit here, we do have a sanitary hookup for winterizing at the end of the year. Each line will need to be winterized, and that'll all be gravity drained back to that pit. So that water does need to go somewhere. Dome pack. I guarantee that you folks that are on this call do not know what a dome pack is, unless you have a dome pack in your community, which I doubt it. But a dome pack is exclusive to Vortex as another housing option for your water quality management system. And this is primarily an option for sites that don't have a building on site already. So it's an all-in-one, pre-assembled with predefined configurations. As we can see here, half of it is installed subgrade, the other half is above grade. Everything is very easy to get to. You're obviously not getting into a room, you're not getting into a vault. Everything is basically right in front of you at arm's reach. This entire pad is about 7 feet wide by 13.5 feet long. We can see anchoring the dome pack here. When I say dome pack, I'm talking about the aluminum mini garage, I like to call it. So anchoring the dome pack, we have our underground chemical reservoirs. These are 50 gallons a piece for muriatic acid and chlorine. Now, there are some limitations when it comes to GPM and maximum outputs or maximum valves. We have a 15 valve limit. So, if we have, 40, 50 features on a splash pad, which I've seen before, a dome pack isn't going to work. But again, it is very advantageous for situations where a site does not have an existing building already, and we don't want to go through the trouble of bidding out the construction and supply of a building, especially if restrooms are nearby. Let's say restrooms are within 100 yards, right? But 100 yards might be is still accessible as far as restrooms are concerned, but that's way too far for pipe runs from a mechanical room out to a splash pad. Skid pack. I see the skid pack, probably the least amount. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. I see it the least amount out of all the projects that I've worked on over the course of my 6 years with Vortex. It is a heck of a lot less work on site. It is very much plug and play. What you're looking at on your screen here, that's how it arrives on site. Everything is pre-assembled. There's no hookups. There's really nothing else to do other than hook up to those utilities that are brought to specified location. Excuse me. So we are either looking at an existing room or a new room. More times than not, it's going to be a new room, a new building, new enclosure that has this dedicated space for the skid pack. So, and this is going to need double door, to be slid in. Certainly this isn't going to fit into just your 6 foot wide single door. But we're going to need a big room. We're looking at probably a 20 by 20 room at minimum to bring this in and make sure that it fits like a glove.
Is it something that people can pick up on a skid steer and that's why it's called a skid pack, or is it something that has to be trucked in, or like what does that kind of logistics look like?
Exactly. You can pick it up on a skid, so that's why it's called what it's called. BK, man, you impress me more and more every day.
I try, Mike.
All right, so we're going to look at a typical layout here of where your tank and your debris trap typically meet each other. So your debris trap, when it comes to a WQMS system, and I'm going to go back a few slides here just so you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so our debris trap is right here. Okay, so this is going to be our first line of defense. After the water hits the splash pad, goes into our drain. This is the first line of defense before it gets into our tank. So it's super important. So that's going to catch all of the initial debris that hits that drain location, your straw wrappers, Band-Aids, anything, a lot of times kids will carry, if there's any loose fill from a playground, like loose safety surfacing fill, they'll carry that to the splash pad, kids being kids type of thing. And this will catch, this debris trap will catch all of that large media that we don't want getting into our tank. It's also hooked up to storm, which makes this component even more ideal, because once the splash pad is not running for 10 minutes or it's outside of the hours of activation, the storm hookup, we can see at number 5 on our screen here. There is a valve inside that debris trap that will instead of sending all of that water that hits the splash pad to our tank, it'll send all that water to storm sewer, assuming that any water that does hit it when the splash pad isn't running or it's outside of the hours of activation is in fact storm water. Anytime we're not allowing storm water to get into our holding tank, that is a good thing. That is exactly what we want to be accomplishing. So we're not diluting that water that's within that holding tank and causing our chemicals to work more than our chemical injectors to work more than they have to or more than they should. Every tank will have a makeup, so that your tank, just to give you the basic details of an underground holding tank here. Your tank is very similar to that of your toilet at home. There's a float inside of there, and if just like when you flush your toilet then refills with water. Same thing with the splash pad. There's a float inside of your splash pad's holding tank, that if that water level gets too low, that will engage the makeup water line to turn on and get back to the level that it needs to be. All right. So every recirculating system, no matter the housing type, is made up of these components, with the exception of the variable frequency drive, although a VFD is, we always suggest it. So UV can be required as a secondary disinfectant. In PA, it is required. So we don't even have to consider whether we should have it or not, because in state health department does require a UV module to be included in your overall solution. Again, the VFD is typically only used on larger splash pads and larger pumps, but it does keep a consistent flow, and you're able to control those pressures so much easier and better when you have a variable frequency drive involved in your solution. But again, just going over all of the different components, and again, I'm not going to dive into every single one, just being cognizant of everybody's time here. But your WQMS system is going to have pumps, filters, chemical control, manifold controller, holding tank, a rain or debris trap. Sometimes that debris trap will be hooked up to your storm sewer, and in which case you will have a rain diverter as well. Your UV secondary disinfectant, again, your VFD, and typically 2 chemical reservoirs, whether those be above ground or below ground. All right, so we talked about the different housings and the different components. So BK, can you make sure? Okay, there we go. We want to look at the 2 different types of WQMS systems. We have a double loop and a single loop. The name says it alone. When you'll have 2 piping loops or pumps on a double loop system. The first pump will be the feature loop, and that's essentially just like what the name implies, that your feature pump pulls water from the tank through your Y strainers, through your UV, if applicable, and then to your manifold. So that is what's bringing the water to your manifold and out to the splash pad. The bypass will allow for the water to be redirected when no one is using the splash pad, since pumps don't like to be shut on and off. They like to be running all the time. That's an easy way to kill a pump, is to turn them on and off all the time. You'll go through you'll kill a pump in about 2 or 3 years if you're continuing to turn it on and off. So having that bypass, it'll keep them running and have a constant flow. The second part of that double loop is your filtration loop. So this will run 24 hours a day to maintain the body of water in the tank and make sure that everything is disinfected at all times. That it's not that the water within the tank is not stagnant. It's consistently being disinfected, turned over with respect to that 30-minute turnover rate that I talked about earlier. Everything is, again, being filtered, and again, making sure that we constantly have a healthy bathing area to play in for our community. So a single loop is, again, just like how it sounds. This is typically for smaller splash pads. A double loop, you have 2 pumps because you want you have a larger body of water you're pulling from, so you want 2 pumps, with respective jobs. Again, one pulling water out to your manifold, and the other pump is filtering your water. With a single loop, you have 1 pump that's doing both of those jobs. Okay, so this is typically going to be on your smaller splash pads that are still using a recirculation system. Typically, we're going to be seeing these on splash pads that are using a 2,000 gallon or a 1,000 gallon tank. So again, the big difference here is instead of 2 pumps, we have 1 pump, and that 1 pump is doing the job of the 2 pumps as compared to that of a double loop system.
Is there a maximum output that this kind of system would be able to support? Like the number of fixtures or things like that?
Yeah, so as soon as we switch from 2,000 gallon tank to a 3,000 gallon tank, we're going to be using a double loop system. And we switch to a 3,000 gallon tank as soon as we exceed about 150, 165 gallons per minute. That's when we're going to move to a 3,000 gallon tank, and we're going to be utilizing a double loop system rather than a single loop system.
Gotcha. So it's more about the actual flow of gallons per minute than necessarily how many holes there are.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So your circulation pump, this is, I'm going to skip just right to this slide here because this tells you the same information. Your feature pump, again, pulls water from the tank, pushes water through your Y strainer, and pushes water to the splash pad. They both have flow and pressure depends on the pump model and pump power. But again, looking at the screen here, the big difference is rather than the feature pump that is pushing water to the splash pad, your filtration pump pushes water back to the tank after it's been filtered. Your Y strainer, this is going to capture any coarse debris that doesn't get caught in your debris trap. This is going to reduce maintenance, especially on solenoid valves that tend to be replaced probably more than anything as far as your overall splash pad solution is concerned. So keeping up with your Y strainers will certainly, and that should be an everyday thing. Keeping up, making sure you're entering your Y strainer baskets. That'll expand the lifespan of your solenoid valves as well. Your sand filter, this is going to capture fine debris as well, improve clarity of water, reduce maintenance of solenoids as well, help with UV system performance, and backwash to clean the overall filter. The manifold's sole function is to distribute the water out to the splash pad at a preset sequence. When I say preset sequence, that means your splash pad is typically going to, unless you, the customer, tell it to otherwise, the splash pad features will run through a sequence where some features are turning on, some features are turning off at seemingly random times. Every feature will turn on eventually throughout an event, but it will run through a preset setting sequences. This is all hooked up to your solutions, your Splashpad Solutions CPU. This is probably your 2 most important components, arguably, on the entire system, because your water does need to be clean and safe. This is your chemical controller. We're typically using a Bex System 3, either for both the single and double loop system, and your chemical feeder. And it's important to understand that even though we standard supply of Beck System 3, like we can obtain other chemical controllers. So if you're comfortable with something else, we can supply that same chemical controller. It will send a chemical, again, super important. It will send a chemical alarm to the Splashpad CPU, telling the Splashpad to turn off if it does go into chemical alarm. So you have peace of mind knowing that if things do get out of whack from a chlorine or acid standpoint, that your Splashpad will shut down before spraying water on any users that happen to be there. And our CP, our chemical, excuse me, our Splashpad controller has advanced enough to where an email will be sent to any maintenance folks or Parks and Rec directors that oversee the Splashpad. An alarm notification will be sent to their email address as well if there's Wi-Fi on site.
Curious on the current codes or processes for chemical readings and things like that. Now, do splash pads have a similar requirement like pools where it's supposed to be checked every hour or so many times a day, or is it more a once a day thing, or is there nothing written in stone yet?
It's typically, right now it's all local code, usually BK. That's all, yeah, that's all going to be county code type of driven. So we always, one of those initial expectation conversations is get to understand your local code. Some local codes require twice a day, some require once a day, some require, once every hour. So it really does all depend.
Okay.
I certainly suggest, even if there is no code, to at least have a log every single day, just to keep a paper trail. That way, if there is an issue, you do have that evidence of what you logged from previous days.
And do some of the controllers help with that kind of reporting aspect, or is it literally just a chemical controller and that's it?
Yeah, so our controller will log some information, the basic information as well. But again, just in case.
Better off having a book next to it just in case.
Yeah, there's nothing more fail safe than having pen and paper yourself. Your chemical feeder, just to finish off this slide here, receives power from the overall chemical controller. We'll inject sodium hypochlorite or liquid chlorine or muriatic acid. The chlorine is going to be your primary disinfectant, whereas the muriatic acid will lower your overall pH. Our chemical containers, again, these are going to be 50 gallons a piece. And your variable frequency jibe, again, we're looking at these having the ability to adjust pump speed, maintain constant pressure, and it will reduce water features effective variation. And it does, as far as an energy savings and extending pump life, it does really help a lot.
And I have research to back that up, talking with some other municipalities specifically in their pools, but the VFDs definitely save a lot of money and they pay for themselves over the life of your equipment.
Yep, exactly. And UV system, diving into these just a little bit more, whether it's single loop or double loop, they're secondary disinfectant. It's approved for crypto reduction, high electrical consumption, destroys any chloramines, that whether they're outdoor or indoor, it'll destroy any of that organic matter. Strainer for UV gray water, and it can increase water temperature. It does have auto wipers on it. For low pressure, you're not going to have those auto wipers. It's not going to have that strainer. It has a lower electrical consumption. Your holding tank and again your debris trap. And I don't want to sound like a broken record here, folks. So just a friendly reminder here of what's involved in the overall system. And then hopping into our differences between single and double loop. What I'll tell you here is to take a screenshot of this slide. It'll certainly help you have a better understanding of the differences between single versus double loop, and making sure that you're choosing the right option for your respective splash pad. So some other considerations before hopping into our flow through option. Our WQMS does require more maintenance. There is non-neglectable electricity costs involved with the WQMS system. It's a higher upfront investment, but we want to make sure that we're considering over the course of time, the lifespan of the splash pad. When we're doing a recirculation system versus a flow through system, and if there's any water costs involved, maybe that initial investment will pay for itself after 5 years. And stressing, I can't stress enough, keeping up with your local codes that request specific filtration system or specific components. For an installation of a WQMS system, you're going to need that 1-inch potable water line that'll be used for makeup water, a 6-inch drain line at minimum. That's a 6-inch stormwater drain line, and a 6-inch sanitary drain line for backwashes. Your power requirements are here as well. It can be 3-phase or single phase, but it is super important that we know if it's 3-phase or single phase beforehand. That way we can provide you with the correct pumps. And we need to plan for, we need to have a good thorough understanding of the entire space for all underground equipment. So a survey being done ahead of time, also very important. And chemicals, having an understanding whether these are going to be above ground or below ground. It certainly doesn't matter to us, but if your WQMS is going into an existing room, perhaps space is tight, and a way to free up some space is to put these chemical tanks underground rather than having taken up space above ground. All right, diving into flow through systems. Very simple solution here, folks. Again, we're hooking up our water line, our potable city water line. And typically a sanitary sewer. Your potable city water line will hook up to the manifold. Your sanitary sewer line, sometimes your storm sewer line will hook up to our drain. Little or no maintenance is required. Typically, you're going to have a little maintenance, obviously, even if that's just blowing off the splash pad with any leaves or debris, once or twice a week. Lower upfront cost and supply and installation, and it's very safe to use because we're spraying the water that we drink every day. The ideal venues for a flow through splash pad are smaller splash pads. So your smaller splash pads are typically going to be found in plazas or cooling stations when we think about a commercial market like a zoo or an amusement park, where people are walking on a super hot day and they just need a small area to cool off in. And then again, your smaller splash pads, even some of your larger splash pads can be flow through, but typically we're planning for low flow nozzles to be involved, and not that there's anything wrong with low flow nozzles. They're just more efficient when it comes to water consumption. So we have 4 different options when it comes to housing for flow through. Wall mount, cabinet, vault, Smartpoint. Our 5th note here of a hydraulic activator. Obviously, that's not a housing option. That is an option when it comes to your activator that does not use any type of power at all. It is completely hydraulic controlled. Super cool. So your wall mounted command center is going to be installed just like how it sounds into an existing room. This is going to be between either 1 and 5 valves, 6 and 10, 11 and 15, or 16 to 20. Anything larger than 20 valves is going to be considered custom. So our standard offering is anything less than 20 valves. Anything more than that, we are into custom, and custom means more money. Anytime you're custom, just assume that that's more money. Inlet sizes are either going to be 2 inches, 2 by 2, 3 inches, 2 by 3 inches, 4 inches, or 2 by 4 inches.
What do
Backflow
those
preventer,
size difference make? Is that just the amount of water that goes, and so your water pressure, or like what does that do?
yeah, that's all going to be directly related to water use. So if we have a splash pad that's using in the ballpark of 72 gallons per minute, really that's going to be the max for a 2-inch line. So once we exceed 72 gallons per minute, we're going to be diving into either a 2 by 2 or a 3-inch supply, all completely related to water consumption.
Gotcha. So the bigger the pipe, the more expensive the water bill.
You got it. You got it. We can include a backflow preventer and a pressure regulator. Pressure regulator, I really suggest it. Obviously it's another extra cost, but man, I just see them do wonders, because otherwise we're simply relying on city water pressure, and sometimes you have too much. And the pressure regulator is really when you have too much pressure. I hardly ever see not enough. More times than not, we have too much, and we need to crank it down. Otherwise, we cause water hammer, especially once we get to like 80 psi at our manifold location. Water hammer is, I mean, that can really do some damage on your manifold. So having that pressure regulator will completely eliminate that concern.
Is there a minimum flow other than it's like otherwise you just get a trickle, or no, you can just push it up?
It's not going to trickle at like 35 or 40 psi, but we're looking for 45 psi. That's 45, 50 psi, somewhere in that window is what we're shooting for. Again, especially if you have like all ground sprays, or low to the ground, even though they're above ground features, but they're short. If we have those type of features or that type of splash pad, 40 psi is perfectly fine. It's one where we have 10, 12, 14 foot features where we want to make sure that we're achieving that 45 psi. So just some pictures here of what this looks like. Again, same idea as far as the drain pit is concerned as the WQMS. We also have a drain pit here for our flow through solution. So we have a sanitary hookup. All of these lines will be drained at the end of the season for winterization purposes. And your controller is always going to be installed right above the manifold. I always like to compare this to like a beer tap, and then rather than each line line distributing beer into a cup, it sends water out to the splash pad. Some customers like that comparison more than others.
I understood it completely.
Good, BK. All right, next we have our above grade cabinet command center, which is an aluminum cabinet that will house your controller and manifold, and it will sit on a concrete slab. Our new design is actually open front and back, so this is just a recent design upgrade, so it just makes keeping up with the above grade cabinet that much easier. The cabinet, just like your wall mount manifold option, this can house up to 20 valves, and we recommend, just like all of our other manifold options, we recommend closer the better when it comes to manifold location and when we're placing the above grade cabinet. So just some pictures here of a recent installation. You can see how close this is to the splash pad. This will certainly help with water pressure. Just kind of basic physics here. The longer those pipe runs have to go, the more pressure we're going to lose. So the closer it is, we're going to keep that constant pressure, that pressure that we're hoping to achieve, that 45 to 50 psi. It also makes installation a heck of a lot easier, and then your installation costs aren't nearly as high. Your Vault Command Center also can contain up to 20 valves. Very seamless integration, obviously, totally low profile here. A lot of times it's installed in a landscaping bed or a flower bed to keep it out of view. In the case that you think that a building or an above grade cabinet is a blight to the overall design, it works just like the above grade cabinet, except for it's underground. Everything else is exactly the same. It's still going to house your splash pad controller. There's still going to need to be the need for a drain line inside the vault for when this needs to be winterized at the end of the season. The backflow preventer and the pressure relayer can be inside, but the backflow preventer will be outside of the vault. So typically we're seeing, even though this splash pad is in a park, we're typically seeing vaults in more of your urban plazas or shopping centers, things of that nature. It's important to note that these aren't watertight. They will block out rain water, but taking into consideration, we always like to plan with maintenance in mind, that if we're taking into consideration grade of the site, that we want to make sure that this isn't at the bottom of a cereal bowl, and that the area is not going to flood. So please keep that in mind if a vault is your option of choice. Smartpoint is my favorite. I know probably most people don't have favorite water management solutions, but I do. Just because I've used it the most, I've used it the most, and it's super effective. It's super cost effective, and I just think it's really cool. The innovation behind it is outstanding. So everything that I've been talking about is actually going to be housed in the middle of the splash pad. So this serves as your drain, this serves as your activator button, this serves as your manifold, and there's actually a little controller inside here too that has some low voltage wiring that runs between that little controller and a timer box that is going to be located isolated from this Smartpoint command center. Everything in here is watertight, it is airtight, it is completely safe to use. Like I said, I have used this solution, I can't even tell you how many times. Especially for those folks who have a budget of less than $100,000 for their overall splash pad project. This is a home run. It does have some capacity restrictions. It can only house up to 10 valves, but a lot of times when we're our flow through splash pads don't need more than 10 valves. And again, it's really simple to understand and take care of. It's a bit cumbersome, obviously, because this is the width of this is 30 inches. It's the width of a typical drain, but again, really easy to understand. Our water hookup is coming directly into here. Our sanitary line is coming directly into here. We're looking at an install, so we can see where water and sewer is coming, and then we have a 1-inch conduit that's going to we're going to fish low voltage wiring, full 14 volt wiring to that activator, to that controller. So that activator button will still be telling the splash pad when to start turning on water. But again, love this solution. Super cost effective when it comes to equipment costs and when it comes to installation costs. And our hydraulic activator. So Typically, our activator does have low voltage wiring running to it, but in this case, our hydraulic activator, there's no electricity required. It's for very, very small, very simple splash pads that have only 3 outputs and a 1-inch maximum supply line. There's no controller, there's no timer. It's very ideal for a small park, or again, something like a cooling station in a commercial venue. Other considerations, typically, again, once we get over 130 gallons per amp, we're not going to be using a flow-through splash pad. We're going to be using low-flow nozzles. We want to verify local codes if this type of solution is even acceptable. Again, this isn't acceptable in California. Sequencing is based on the lowest capacity and is set around at 70% total. And we want to, we always recommend to validate water costs. What are we expected to spend or at the end of every season? And we can run those formulas for you if we have an understanding of what a community is paying per 1,000 gallons of use. Typically, we need a 2-inch line. We can go up to a 3-inch line. We need a 6-inch sanitary line. Again, our electric power is very minimal. It's basically just what you would need to turn on a light switch at home. 120 volt, 60 hertz, very, very minimal. So easy to install from a power load standpoint. And utilities, we need water, drain, electricity be brought to specific locations. All right, I know we have 2 minutes here. We still have some slides to get to. I knew this was going to be because there's a lot involved in this.
That's all right. That's why it's recorded. So if people need to drop off, that's fine, and they can check back in and catch the information later.
All right, thanks, BK. So our third type of water management solution, we have our repurposing solution. So it is similar to that of a flow-through system, but instead of having the water go to the sanitary sewer, the water will be used for other purposes, such as irrigating a football field, nearby vegetation, or to utilize a percolation tank or aqua blocks that irrigate a landscaping field. Any communities where they have a strong go for green go green type of movement within their community. This is a very ideal option. It's certainly the most efficient. So municipal parks with an adjacent field are again cities with very high water costs. We have a percolation tank option. So this will allow you to redistribute the water in the ground instead of sending it to sanitary. It's super important to get a soils report that indicates the depth of the water table, because we need to be above the groundwater of a minimum of 3 feet, and understand the percolation rate, which is the speed at which the water will seep through the soil. This will indicate to us how big the reservoir needs to be. So we're looking at an installation here. We can see, like in the top left-hand corner, where we have the excavation has started for the splash pad, and then in the larger picture here, we can see where the aqua blocks are starting to be assembled for proper percolation to this nearby field. Surface irrigation option. So for surface irrigation, we have this subterranean tank, which is where the water from the splash pad will go. There will then be a pump pulling the water to a UV system and to a treated tank, and then so no chemicals are used. But it's important to know that if it will be a public or a private space, that UV will need to be used to disinfect that water before it's able to be sprayed above grade. So we don't want to be spraying gray water onto, even though that's not likely, it's still possible. We don't want to be spraying gray water onto anybody. And our third final option is sub-irrigation. So sub-irrigation is exactly the same as your surface irrigation repurposing solution, but everything is happening below ground. So that field we need to have an understanding of the proximity of that field that we're going to be irrigating, how close that is to the splash pad. Again, an underground tank will be provided, but the irrigation pump and drip hose will be by others. Easiest way to remember this and understand it is we're a splash pad company. We aren't an irrigation company. We're not going to provide the irrigation pumping station for you as well.
Sub irrigation essentially is just a leach field, like your home septic
exactly
almost, right?
Yeah, it's actually in my notes. I just skipped over it. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. So again, just some reminders on considerations for a repurposing solution. Soils report is super important for all three options. Irrigation systems require a 3-inch potable water to tank for makeup water. It falls in between, as far as maintenance is concerned, WQMS and flow through. WQMS being the most maintenance heavy, flow through being the least. Again, it's always important to look up your local codes. I can't stress that enough. I know I say it a million times, but make sure to have an understanding of your local codes. It is the highest investment when it comes to installation, but again, it doesn't get any more efficient when it comes to water usage. It's also super cool to, and I'll give you a little case study here. I've seen these used as a field trip to teach kids the importance of repurposing water and how that can impact an overall site design. Especially in high school, where kids have a pretty thorough understanding of physics, how water moves. But we're looking at a case study here in, as you can imagine, California, where all the splash pad water here was used to irrigate all of the nearby landscaping. That tank can actually be moved from location to location, that tank that's gathering all that water. Is it a pain? Yeah, it's a little bit of a pain, but if you did want to move that tank, you can move that tank and water any other nearby parks with that water once it needs to be treated. But once it is treated, you can use that water. It's also important. I want to make sure I did note this. This is all a reverse engineering process. We need to know exactly how much water is required for the nearby landscaping before we plan the splash pads design.
So it's essentially incorporated into a landscape plan if people are doing this kind of solution.
You got it. Yep. Real quick, for all projects, containing a water management system, we will provide a thorough piping and electrical plan, which will include piping details, electrical details, location of anchors, room layout for the recirculation system, and we'll give you 3 different packages. One will be just for bid purposes. One will be for health department approval. And then we provide our final set, which is our construction set. And once installation starts, that is the final package of piping and electrical documents is our construction set. So our intelligent control, and we're about to wrap things up here, folks. The Maestro controller, our Maestro Pro controller, is our most intelligent controller that we've released. You can have remote access from your office for maintenance, which will reduce on-site visits. It's an extremely simple interface and works very similar to that of an iPad, where you can include custom sequencing. You can set event times if there's a 4th of July event coming up and you want it just for that particular day for the splash pad to be open, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. You can set that. There's the ability to reduce water consumption directly from your controller. It has temperature alarms. It has activation history. Again, it'll store chemical data. It's extremely thorough and capable of just about anything you would look for a Splashpad controller to do. And every Splashpad presentation mentions the activator, but really it's a critical piece of the overall solution. That way we're not just running the Splashpad when nobody's on it. So a sensor switch integrated with a stainless steel bollard allows the user to make the magic happen. As soon as this button is pressed, the water will turn on. And every kid loves having the ability to be the one to make the magic happen. Our final slide, and I want to finish with telling you about what's up and coming. Right now we don't have a whole heck of a lot when it comes to solar energy powering a Splashpad, but that is the future. And Smart City Intelligent, like that Maestro Pro, is the first component of this trend of smart cities. And being able to control 6, 7, up to even 10 splash pads, from a remote location by being able to access every single controller with the click of a button from your office. Misting solutions we've already released misting solutions as a part of up and coming trends, but with global warming still being it's not going away, and our temperatures are rising, our earth temperatures are rising. Having more areas planned for parks where people can just simply cool off for a minute or two. It doesn't need to be a splash pad, but just an area where somebody can press a button, and maybe that's solar powered, where they can press a button to a misting station that's solar powered, and that turns on, it cools them off for a minute or two, and they can continue with their bike ride or their walk or their run. All right. I appreciate everybody sticking with me. I think I was about an hour and 5 minutes. So this was a long one. I do hope that you learned quite a bit. But I do thank you, and I'll open up the floor if there's anybody still on the call for questions, which I don't think there is, PK.
Well, this was fantastic, though. And I guess some of the biggest questions that may come up in thinking future, and we have an event tomorrow talking about the future of water and irrigation. You mentioned that you guys don't do irrigation, but other organizations do irrigation, and water usage is becoming a very important topic, especially when we think about sustainability. And so I'm curious, are you seeing more trends? You mentioned in California, for example, like you can't do a flow through system. And so are some of the solutions that are currently out there maybe not the way to go if we're looking at something to future proof our materials, because regulations could change, water costs could change. And so maybe we should be thinking, even though upfront it may be a little bit more expensive on the build, in the long run, it's going to make it more longevity of our program, or so what are some of those kind of shifts that you see?
Here's the great thing about water management systems, and all three of those. You're certainly never going to have a health department tell you that you shouldn't be repurposing the water, especially if it's being UV treated. That puts a big smile on anybody, on any health department's face, that you're not you are, again, being as green as possible by using all of that water to water a nearby station. Let's say your local health department decides no more flow through splash pads, can't have them anymore. They can be converted to a recirculation system. That's certainly possible.
So people aren't stuck. They don't have to tear the whole thing out and start over again. The water solution can be adjusted.
There's going to be some work, but it can be adjusted. There kind of a will, there's a way, you're not crap out of luck.
Okay. And what about going along with that thought? What if all of a sudden we realize that the splash pad we installed wasn't big enough? Is it a good methodology to then find a new site and start a new project, or do we try to add on? Or like playgrounds, I can take another module and put it over there.
Right.
Does it work the same way with?
It doesn't. So
No. Okay.
I always tell folks to plan for bigger, obviously a budget needs to be, considered, but if you're thinking, oh, this might not be big enough, don't settle. Make it bigger than even you think it needs to be, because it will be very popular. And the fact of the matter is that it is, in some cases, you would need this wasn't planned for in advance. We do offer options to phase something in, but I think you're asking something different, right? So
kind of, yeah, like we've already made a decision, we went through it and like, oh, that wasn't big enough. Oh, we can just add on a little bit more, no. But so what I'm hearing then, if you are in that situation, you're finding a new site, and then creating a new project, and now you have two splash pads as you're trying to have
because most of the time,
two.
all of those distribution lines they're hooked up to their respective features. They're already in use. There's nothing else to pull from. There's nothing else to extend off of. So in which case we're going to need another manifold and basically do the same thing over again. We can make a concrete pad bigger, but it's everything that's happening underneath the splash pad.
It's the infrastructure of it.
Yeah,
I gotcha. And I had one question that I've seen on NRPA, looking at surfacing. Is there a best surface for splash pads? Is concrete safer, or some people going pour in place, or are there some of these considerations to worry about? Because I could see something like a pour in place, since you're getting so much water come winter, it's going to heave everything up. But I don't know.
You're exactly right. Yeah. Your EPDM, your pour in place, not great when it comes to over the course of time. Algae can start to form because it's porous. It will pop. And once things start popping and cracking, especially when it comes to safety surfacing, that can be, you can be in a world of trouble there, especially with your filtration system. Most splash pads we do are medium broom finished concrete. But if you do want to go safety surfacing, I definitely suggest an option that is more tile rather than
kind of like those pads that you see in an entryway to a door, almost just across the kitchen pads.
Yeah, exactly. They're just exactly how you put together like your vinyl flooring for
right.
Same type of analogy going on there. As you can imagine, I'm not much of a DIY guy. But
with the holes in it, does that create a surface, like a safety issue at that point then, or is that kind of expected?
No, so there are no holes. When I say the tiling option, like they all form together.
Okay, it's a porous pad that just goes together. Okay.
Yeah, like you're literally taking tiles that all form together to like a lot of times you're creating a design, and you're basically like you're making a life-size puzzle. Like you have a weapon. They're all those pieces are formed together.
And that kind of goes along. We'll kind of wrap this up here, but like a splash pad, is it a playground? Isn't it aquatic pool? Where does it fall on that continuum? And like, as we move into, liability and kind of concerns of the industry moving forward, is there going to be a point that we need a lifeguard on a splash pad, or like where are some of those regulations we're at right now, or is it still just kind of so new that no one's thinking that way yet?
I really don't anticipate the need for a lifeguard to ever be the case, unless there is standing water for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah, I still feel as though this is going to be a play at your own risk. Really, I shouldn't say we as a company, speaking on behalf of Vortex, feel as though this is going to be a play at your own risk amenity for the foreseeable future. There's really nothing indicating that that this is going to need more attention than it does already.
Would that make a difference if it's a stand out there public thing, or if I put a fence around it and charge to come in? Does that change the game?
We always suggest to it doesn't necessarily change the game, but if it is pay to play, you're going to obviously have to have somebody there, that's monitoring, people coming in and out into cash and cash flow. But it really won't change much as far as somebody having to be there or keeping up with it. But we always suggest fencing, especially if a parking lot is going to be nearby or it's near a busy street.
Great point. Yeah.
That's in some cases it's common sense, but it's not always viewed from an aesthetic standpoint as something that's that it's a must have.
Sure.
I've heard feedback from people say, yeah, we don't want this to feel like it's it's a jail. We want people to kind of come and go as they please. So
those are all great points. And moving forward too, with legislation always changing, it's important to kind of stay on top of these things too, because right now there really is no safety inspection stamp of approval outside of Department of Health and water concerns.
Right.
It doesn't need to have looking for those pinch points and making sure you get like a playground, so, but is there some of those, since you have moving parts and things like that, is there industry concern on some of those safety things, or is that still kind of out there in the industry?
Yeah, that's still kind of out there in the industry. We always at Vortex design with safety in mind. So there's take for example our cannons, right? Some of the other cannons out in the field, you'll see they have stop points, right, where you can only turn them so far.
Right.
And now most of those don't have necessarily pinch points when they arrive on site, but over the course of time, when those are constantly banging up against its stop point, something like a pinch point can occur, or just the innards of that cannon will wear down because you have that banging constantly occurring. Ours rotate 360 degrees, but that bushing inside of there will turn off the water once it gets to a certain point. So if you try to turn 180 degrees and spray mom and dad that are
I see, it pinches it and shuts off the opening.
Right. Yep,
That's
exactly.
Good. That makes everybody happy, right?
Right.
And how about ADA? Is there a universal design kind of principle that goes along with some of these layouts and designs, or the amenities that are put within? What are some of the thoughts behind that?
At its very core, Splashpad is ADA accessible. That's the entire idea behind Splashpad. So we always, when we're working with landscape architects and master planners, engineers, we always make sure to make them aware that this needs to be an area that's accessible for everybody. Wheelchair, from parking lot to Splashpad, this needs to be wheelchair accessible. We don't like to see stairs and involved with accessing the Splashpad. So walk ramps that are graded in such a way that it's easy for somebody who is wheelchair bound to access the Splashpad. Splashpad itself shouldn't have a slope of more than 2%. 1 to 2% is plenty to drain all the water that hits the Splashpad to the drains in a quick and efficient manner. But it shouldn't, it shouldn't be more than 2%. I believe the actual ADA code is 4 or 4.5%, to where it's no longer ADA accessible because a wheelchair could topple over due to the slope.
Yeah, and sometimes your side
right
angles and things like that too. Yep.
Yeah, most of the I shouldn't say most, all of your above single post splash pad features are going to be placed at minimum 3 feet apart from each other, which is what's required for wheelchair maneuverability to go in and out of the water features themselves.
And probably all things like activators are at that 30 to 36 as well, and kind of height wise.
Cannons, activators, yes, exactly. They're all at that height.
Right on. Well, this has been very educational, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time and extending some of your time to answer our questions here. And this has been a great series.
Yeah, BK, we certainly appreciate it. Again, speaking on behalf of Vortex, this has been a super collaboration that we're happy, we're proud to be a part of. We'd love for it to continue in the future. You guys have this Parks and Maintenance Institute. I wish more states would incorporate this type of concept, because I think it's so useful to get this information out there to those who may not be in on those conversations, those initial conversations, in the beginning stages. A lot of these maintenance folks are thrown into, for lack of a better way of describing it, hey, this is your job to take care of this now. And they're although we provide training, there's still a lot of things that they're learning on the fly. So involving them in these types of conversations, these types of shop talks is, I think it's fantastic. So, once again, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll hopefully be continuing this relationship moving forward.
Absolutely. I'm working on my 2022 schedule right now, so we can be seeing some more of those details, before the new year. I want to extend my gratitude to Vortex Aquatic Structures International for their sponsorship for these 2 enlightening shop talks that we've hosted, focusing on splash pads. And we want to hear from you. So please reach out to me, my email, bk@prps.org. Look us up online on the website and subscribe, because that helps us support moving forward. But for now, I'm BK, Director of the Park Maintenance Institute. I want to thank Mike. I want to thank Vortex for all of their support as we've put these events together. And I want to thank all of you for joining us, and host you again.
Take care, guys.